Hey, what is up everybody, it's Animac here for Anime Uproar, and All For One just defeated the heroes and stole a major character's quirk. Deku and Shigaraki are about to have an unexpected visitor that neither of them really want to see. And all of Japan and even the whole world is in tears as they witness the sacrifices of the pro heroes. MHA is absolutely unreal right now. Tears are flowing everywhere. We have to talk about it. You guys know the drill. If you enjoy our MHA videos, you want to see more in the future, leave a quick like and comment right now. It only takes you a second, but it helps me out a lot with that YouTube algorithm. And if you are one of the over 50% of people who watch our videos but haven't taken the time to subscribe, do me a big favor and make this the video that you subscribe and hit that notification bell. Do it right now. By the way, I recently made an entire video on how Deku could have become a villain if one important thing was changed in the MHA story. I put a ton of work into that video, and it features everything from epic editing to professional voice actors voicing Deku and other characters. So please check it out, link in the description and in the pinned comment. Finally, this video will contain Boku no Hero manga spoilers, so please proceed with caution. You have been warned. In the previous chapter, we learned that Makia willingly betrayed All For One because he felt abandoned by his master. This means that Makia, who is of course an absolute monster and possesses multiple overpowered quirks, is actively and willingly fighting with the heroes and against All For One. We also learned that multiple members of the media are now filming the climactic battle between the heroes and villains. And La Brava is also live streaming it to tens of thousands of people through Gentle's YouTube channel. Because of this, the rest of Japan and the entire world is now able to witness what is really happening right now on the battlefield. This epic war is attracting the attention of everyone, including the general public, former heroes who retired, international heroes, the US president, and even characters who up until this point were movie only. And as the battle at Gunga Mountain continues to rage, the absolute Chadlass Mount Lady is fighting so hard that she breaks the giant wrench that she had been using as a weapon. Yui from Class 1B then tosses her another object that she also gigantifies like she did with the wrench, and this weapon is an item made by Detnerat. Mount Lady and Tokoyami are clearly exhausted from the battle, but they refuse to give up, and they go in for yet another massive attack on All For One. Makia is also still fighting, while Hawks and others are providing as much support as they can. But even these overpowered tag team attacks are not enough to take All For One down, and he manages to deliver a brutal hit to Mount Lady's midsection. She collapses to the ground, and Mineta, Hawks, and others are clearly concerned about how serious her injuries might be. It's not looking good. Right after that, some sort of deadly energy beam smashes into Makia, and this causes him very serious injuries. We then get a look at the man who launched that energy beam, All For One, but he barely looks like a man at all. As a result of all the massive attacks that he has been absorbing, he looks more like a decomposing corpse than a living creature. However, thanks to his super regeneration, he is able to keep healing himself no matter how much damage he takes. He looks terrible, like some sort of decayed skeleton, and yet he is still actively fighting and launching attack after attack at the heroes. Another energy beam then takes out the giant dark shadow almost instantly, and Tokoyami is severely wounded as a result of this attack. I guess this makes sense because the energy beam that All For One is using seems to be potentially light-based, like a light beam, which would of course be super effective against Dark Shadow. Tokoyami would actually have been dead if Hawks hadn't sacrificed his own body in order to provide some cover for Tokoyami. But this results in Hawks also taking some extremely serious damage. All For One is impressed with the power of his own attacks. Now that he is young again, he is able to draw out the full potential of every single one of his quirks, which means that they are now even more powerful and more effective than they were before. All For One does say that this comes at a cost, and the cost seems to be that he is reducing how much time he has left before his body rewinds itself out of existence. But he clearly feels that the sacrifice is worth it. The remaining heroes try to keep going and keep attacking, but it's no use. All For One is too strong, and the heroes fall one by one. As an unconscious Tokoyami lays motionless on the ground, All For One grabs the injured Hawks by the neck and lifts him up into the air. All For One says that he plans to steal Tokoyami's quirk, but Hawks keeps getting in his way, so All For One wants to make sure that this won't happen again. Hawks tries to pierce All For One with one of his blades, but even though the blade pierces through All For One, it has no real effect. All For One simply ejects the blade from his body and easily regenerates. To make things worse, like a lot worse, we see that All For One is beginning to grow wings on his back, meaning that as he is holding Hawks by the neck, he is currently in the process of stealing Hawks' quirk. A frustrated Hawk says that it just isn't fair that even though All For One's body is rewinding, he still gets to keep all of his quirks. I mean, I see where Hawks is coming from, but we have to assume that All For One knew that this would happen, otherwise he wouldn't have used rewind in the first place. Just then, Mineta gets involved for some reason, even though he'd be better off running as far away as possible and hiding immediately. Mineta throws one of his balls at All For One and it sticks to the back of his leg. With tears in his eyes, Mineta begs All For One not to steal Tokoyami's quirk because that would turn him into a cringy edgelord. Mineta says that if All For One wants to steal a truly Chadley quirk, he should steal Pop-Off because it would give him the best hairstyle ever. Mineta is a pretty massive Chad, and his hairstyle is pure Riz. Jokes aside, this was brave of Mineta, but of course it has no effect on All For One. He's not about to fall for some cheap, desperate tricks. He is on a tight schedule. All For One looks at Mineta's teary face, and it reminds him of Jiro's face, which was also full of desperate courage and idealistic commitment. But All For One doesn't have time for these side characters or their tears. He is running out of time, and he needs to get out of there and find Shigaraki right now. He takes off flying and leaves the battlefield in ruins, with all the heroes and hero students laid out on the ground. He now presumably has Hawks' quirks, although I guess he didn't end up taking Tokoyami's because he ran out of time. Seeing that the news helicopters are flying around in the area, All For One mocks the heroes because the entire world is now going to see how pathetic they truly are. The heroes lost. They got absolutely bodied by just one man, and they couldn't protect anyone or anything. The chapter then switches focus to the underground civilian shelter, where all the civilians who were supposed to be evacuated from the UA are currently located. As I mentioned in my previous videos, the fact that these civilians didn't make it to their rendezvous point with the Shiketsu students means that something went wrong. Something that probably involves All For One's spies who had infiltrated the shelter many chapters ago. Apparently, the shelter lost power, the lights went out, and now everyone is stuck there underground. The civilians inside the shelter are watching the big battle unfold on their tablets, phones, and other devices, and they are devastated to see what's happening to the heroes. We see the Todorokis there, some of those overpowered next generation kids from the Remedial Course arc, and many others as well. Meanwhile, Tsukauchi and La Brava have been attempting to get to the civilians, but they haven't been able to. They know that All For One won the battle at Gunga Mountain, and that he is now heading towards Shigaraki and the UA. But they can't seem to figure out what is happening with the underground shelter system. Even though La Brava regained control of the security systems, some of the blocks that make up the underground structure seem to be locked from the inside, and she can't seem to unlock them on her end. Someone inside the shelters has been interfering with the security system. Someone is sabotaging them. The one who has been tampering with the system is the male spy who looks like an adult Mob from Mob Psycho 100. He may have some sort of electric quirk and he's using it to like short circuit the system. He is waiting for further orders from Skeptic, but he hasn't been able to get in touch with Skeptic for a while, and we of course know why. Skeptic has already been apprehended by the heroes, thanks in large part to La Brava. The spy isn't exactly sure what to do now that he's been cut off from his orders, but he knows that he has to do something because once the big battle on the surface is over, All For One will emerge as the ruler of the world, and so the spy can't fail him. He has to do something to impress his new overlord, All For One. So the spy starts using the quirk to actively damage the shelter, and soon parts of the shelter's ceiling begin to break and fall. Gunhead, Kendo, and Tetsutetsu react immediately and try to prevent a large chunk of the ceiling from collapsing on a couple of civilians. But the chunk of ceiling is so big that it doesn't look like they'll be able to fully stop it. Nevertheless, before the students can make their move, Death Arms grabs the huge chunk of ceiling and prevents it from falling on the civilians. Realistically, Kendo and Tetsutetsu may not have been able to handle this one. So Death Arms intervening with his super strength quirk at this exact point may have saved the lives of these civilians. As we know, Death Arms already retired and gave up on being a hero following what happened in Jakku. But after seeing what the other heroes have been going through on the battlefield, he simply couldn't help himself. His body moved on its own and he did what he had to do. He used his strength to protect the innocent. Tears run down Death Arms' face as he remembers how Deku ran to save Bakugo from the sludge villain back in chapter 1. And he did it without any regard for his own safety or well-being. After all, at the time, he was quirkless. This reminds Death Arms of what it means to be a true hero, and it reminds him of what true courage looks like. The final page takes us back to Kamino, where an injured Shoto is leaning on Ida for support. Shoto tells Ida that it's not over yet. The battle is not done yet. And in the final chapter, we see that close to them and watching them from above is none other than the hero killer, Stain. And so, it looks like All For One might have been wrong about the effect that the media footage of the battle is going to have on the public. He seems to think that seeing the heroes lose again will convince everyone that fighting is pointless and that all hope is lost. But it seems that the media footage is having the opposite effect. Civilians and former heroes and international heroes and everyone else is seeing how hard the current heroes are fighting against seemingly impossible odds. And this is reminding them of what true courage looks like, what true heroism looks like. All For One's overconfidence may be backfiring on him again, because as Shoto said to Ida, it's not over yet. This chapter really did try to make us feel two contradictory things at once. On the one hand, Horikoshi really wanted us to witness the overwhelming strength of All For One's power. I mean, he literally cleared the battlefield and took down Makia, Mount Lady, Tokoyami Hawks, and so many others on his own. He then mocked the heroes and flew away towards Shigaraki, meaning that the heroes at Gunga straight up failed in their main mission, the mission to stop All For One from leaving and reaching Shigaraki. But at the same time, we saw people like Death Arms and Shoto and others deciding that even with everything that happened, they won't give up. They will continue fighting. All For One's victory at Gunga did not make them lose hope. On the contrary, it inspired them to keep going in order to honor the sacrifices of all those heroes who kept fighting against impossible odds. So the chapter makes us feel both hope and hopelessness at the same time, and I personally like that. All For One did indeed defeat all of his enemies, and he is now on his way to Shigaraki. This is something that I and many others predicted. All For One can't just die or rewind himself out of existence without ever seeing Shigaraki and Deku again. He will make it to the UA battlefield, and he will try one last time to reclaim his vessel. Ultimately, I believe that he will fail and the true final villain will be Shigaraki, not All For One. But All For One definitely isn't done yet. He still has some tricks up his sleeve. Now, of course, we are all expecting him to try to place his quirk factor inside Shigaraki in order to force his new vessel to obey him, and then an internal struggle is likely to occur. But as I mentioned in previous videos, I actually hope that for All For One's final trick, he attempts something much more unexpected. I hope that he tries to take over Deku's body instead of Shigaraki's, because that way he would possess both the All For One and the One For All quirk factors at the same time. If he could somehow win that internal struggle, he would become the perfect villain, a true quirk god. I mean, we still have to be realistic. MHA is Deku's story, so we know that if All For One tried to take over his body, Deku would win in the end. But it would be really interesting to see what kind of being Deku would become if All For One took control of his body, even just temporarily. Just imagine All For One using Deku's body to use both All For One and One For All at the same time against his enemies. And while he's doing this, no one wants to actually kill him because they don't want to kill Deku. Taking over Deku's body would be just the perfect devious master strategy for All For One. It makes all the sense in the world. What do you guys think? Will All For One try to take over Shigaraki's body, or maybe Deku's? Could he possibly succeed in doing either of these two things? What would a villain Deku who is controlled by All For One and possesses both All For One and One For All look like? Is Stain finally about to join the heroes? And if he does, what difference could he make in this battle? Don't forget to share your thoughts down in the comments below. And if you want to watch a detailed video on how Deku could have become a legit villain and teamed up with Stain if one change was made to the MHA story, check out my video on what if Deku became a villain, link in the description and in the pinned comment. If you enjoyed this video and you want to see more in the future, leave a quick like right now. And if you're one of the over 50% of people who watch our videos but haven't taken the time to subscribe yet, I'm asking you again to please do me a huge favor and make this the video that you subscribe and hit that notification bell to turn on all notifications. Until next time, see ya, Space Cowboys.